I'm sorry that you feel that way, old man. Ultimately, I will prevail, and a new era will be born unto the realm. Embrace it as I have.
If you told me a few years back that in the year 2023, Baldur's Gate would be one of the most talked about video game franchises on the planet, I probably would have laughed in your face. But, well, here we are. And as you likely know, Baldur's Gate 3 finally arrived recently from one of my very favorite game developers, Larian. A staggering 23 years after the second installment in the franchise, and man, it has absolutely taken the world by storm, smashing all sorts of records for sales and concurrent players within the CRPG genre. Shoot, even some of my more meathead friends that typically only play FPS games have told me on how they plan to romance Halsin.
He's a big boy.
It's truly a beautiful thing, seeing so many new people and gamers around the world learning about the fantastic setting of the Forgotten Realms, along with all of the iconic locations, characters, gods, and game systems that made the original Baldur's Gate titles so special. But I'ma be honest with you guys, as I have gone headfirst into BG3, loving every single second of it, my mind absolutely has been lingering on where the franchise all started. I'm talking about the stories, the encounters, and the characters that first brought this game world to life. And it's Baldur's Gate 1 specifically for me that has always carried a certain gravitas, a mythical aura of epic scale dark fantasy adventure that really feels like the ground zero of this entire genre. Its writing, its atmosphere, music, extremely archaic combat, straightforward narrative, and number crunching, dude, it still hits all the right notes for me today. But of course, in general, we can never forget that the Forgotten Realms setting here takes place under the Dungeons and Dragons domain, a universe built around morality, alignment, classic fantasy tropes, and the traditional stories of good versus evil. And on this channel, buddy, we are very interested in the villains and how they can function across a given game or entire game series. Now, if you ask me, there is nothing more important in a story-based video game than a compelling baddie, and the Baldur's Gate games have a long-standing tradition of playing host to some extremely iconic and incredibly evil antagonists, both big and small. But today, as you have probably guessed by this point, we wind the clocks all the way back to have a look at the original Baldur's Gate villain. A physically massive, terrifying, brilliant, and deeply evil man with a very mysterious origin and upbringing. A ruthless killer with a dark twist of divinity, chasing prophecy and murdering everyone in his path as he attempts to claim what he believes is his by birthright. A monster who is attempting to spill as much blood as is humanly possible in order to ascend to godhood. Ladies and gentlemen, today's video is all about the one and only Deathbringer, Sarevok Anchev. But Sarevok is much more than just the villain of Baldur's Gate. He is an idol of classic video game antagonism. And at the end of the game, once defeated, his legacy continues right on through to the sequel, and guess what? He even appears in Baldur's Gate 3 as well. So there is a lot to cover here and a lot to enjoy, my friends. So I gotta know, what does this bloodthirsty Sarevok want? What are his powers and abilities? Why is he so interested in us, the player character? And if he appears in the most recent game, what really is his ultimate fate? Well, first, a very quick and sincere thank you to all of my patrons who help me out so much by supporting this channel away from YouTube. You guys are the best, man. Now, without further ado, I am Ghost, your host as always, and please do note that this video contains some major spoilers for all these games, but I'm avoiding as much as possible when it comes to BG3, because it's still pretty new. Now please, take my hand and follow me to the Forgotten Realms. So the game Baldur's Gate takes place in the land of Faerun, a continent on the world of Toril. And here in western Faerun along the Sword Coast is where our stage is set. And well, if we're talking about the life of the great Sarevok and his path to terror and methods of villainy, it all begins right here in the Forest of Worms, a dark and dangerous wood that long held many bloody secrets. But geez, man, I think somehow we are already getting ahead of ourselves, because if we want to understand Sarevok and really the overall structure of the Baldur's Gate games, we gotta zoom way out and cover something on a much larger and cosmic scale, and that thing is Baal, the god of murder. So the lore of Dungeons & Dragons is of course chock full of various different races, cultures, religions, and gods. Now, some of these gods are good, but others are absolutely evil. Some are neutral, lawful, chaotic, and so on. And it's very much a pantheon sort of situation. For example, some of the other gods on tap are Gond, god of craft, or Mystra, goddess of magic, with all of these different gods being worshipped by different groups, cults, and people for all sorts of different reasons. But Baal, well, he sounds deliciously evil, doesn't he? And that's because, well, he certainly is. Neutral evil to be specific. And believe it or not, without this devious, bloody god, our villain Sarevok would not exist at all. So yes, Baal was the god of murder, the Dread Lord, the host of violence and ritualistic killings, also known as Nyan-Gushie-Gampo in certain parts of the world. But long, long ago, in ancient times, before he was a god, Baal was mortal, a human, a deadly assassin and power-hungry adventurer. And as a mortal, Baal was the kind of guy who had much bigger things on his mind than riches and infamy. You see, he was more into eternal, otherworldly accolades. So he, along with his two homies, Bane the Tyrant and Mirkul the Necromancer, embarked on an epic quest to either achieve godhood or die trying. And on this adventure, they were able to confront the ancient god of death, Jergal, in his realm known as the Grey Waste. And upon the three's arrival, Jergal said, "Hey guys, no problem. You want to become gods and take my portfolio? It's all yours." However, before doing so, suggested to the three that instead of fighting each other for total power over the domain of death, that they split it 3 ways. Legends say that the friends then played a little game of chance called Knucklebones, and the winner, Bane, got first pick. So he decided to rule over hatred and tyranny. Mirkul then chose to rule over the dead themselves, and Baal obviously stuck with murder and death. Very fitting, considering their mortal occupations, I would say. But, my friends, as we have learned across many videos on this channel, being a god in a fantasy universe can be a rather fickle thing. And that is especially true here in the Forgotten Realms. And these three, who probably felt extremely badass after becoming Lords of Death, would eventually, down the timeline, face a grisly fate themselves. Because a pivotal event in the entire chronology of the land of Faerun was a cataclysmic period known as the Time of Troubles. And it was actually set off by Bane and Mirkul, power-hungry as ever, as the two attempted to steal relics known as the Tablets of Fate. These tablets literally maintained the entire balance of law and chaos, so pretty important stuff, and when they were caught in the act, the Overgod, or big head honcho amongst divines named Ao, said, "Hey yo, enough is enough," then forced all of the deities to give up their divinity and walk the mortal world with their worshippers. Now, this unsurprisingly led to absolute chaos and upheaval. Numerous gods were slain, replaced by mortals who ascended or lost in some other way. And our original 3 companions we're talking about here came to be known after this time period as the Dead Three, but definitely not for reasons that they would have liked, because all of them, Bane, Baal, and Mirkul, were killed during this time. Bane fell fighting Torm, the patron deity of paladins. Mirkul was defeated by a mage named Midnight, and Baal was murdered by a mortal named Cynic, who then absorbed all sorts of various gods' powers, and he's just a crazy character that would sidetrack this entire video. But the point is, the god of murder was murdered. However, in the years leading up to the Time of Troubles, Baal had foreseen this very outcome. Yes, he knew his death was coming, and let's just say he did certain things to ensure a sort of future for himself should he fall. Now let's not be cute about it, homie. The plan was simple. Leading up to the Time of Troubles, Baal entered the mortal world as a man and attempted to impregnate as many women of as many different races as he possibly could, and on this quest, he was rather successful. Each child he sired gave him a much greater hope of one day being reborn, a grand attempt to circumvent his very own death. The prophecy written by wise sage Alondo stated, "The Lord of Murder shall perish, but in his doom he shall spawn a score of mortal progeny. Chaos will be sown from their passing. So saith the wise Alondo." And these children of Baal would come to be known as Baal Spawn. And let's just say the narrative function of those Baal Spawn is absolutely everything to the plot of these games. But I gotta be honest here for a touch, Forgotten Realms lore can be spotty here and there, with the Baldur's Gate games really just being a really small window into a much larger universe with books, comics, tabletop modules, and all this other stuff. And BG3 releasing kinda only further complicates some of the characters and the timeline of Bhaalspawn and the ultimate goals of stuff. But to put it really simply, in my view, Bhaal was banking on the fact that all of these mortal children would be murderous bastards just like himself, and expected those Bhaalspawn to either be ritualistically sacrificed as babies by his followers, or grow up to take each other out one by one. But regardless, whenever one of these spawn would perish or die in some way, they would release their share of Bhaal's spirit. And once they're all dead, his entire whole essence would be floating around in the Nether, and a ritual or two later, he would be able to return anew. Which, all told, sounds like a fine plan, I guess. But before this entire video becomes about Bhaal, let's talk about the Bhaalspawn themselves. So, as I stated, these people would be of nearly every race in Faerûn, scattered around the world ignorant to their divine lineage. But nearly all of the Bhaalspawn certainly felt the pull of the Lord of Murder. I'm talking about an urge to do dark, nasty, or violent things as each of them grew older. Many of them ended up being outright evil, and almost all of them were gifted in some way, special abilities, smarts, physical strength, etc. And while there are multiple spawn that can be considered notable in the history of Faerûn, there's one we are most interested in, and it should come as no surprise, his name is Sarevok. So Sarevok was born a human male somewhere on the Sword Coast. To be honest, there's very little known about his actual birth, and his mother's identity is a total mystery. But as a baby, he, along with many of his Bhaal half-siblings, were kidnapped and gathered together by cultists to be sacrificed in a grim, dank temple where I originally said our story would begin, within the Forest of Worms. So who knows how many babies were a part of this, but it was seen as a vital step, of course, to bringing the Lord of Murder back. However, just as the spawn were going to be put to the blade, the doors to the temple were broken down by a group of harpers led by a wise sage and monk known as Gorion, a very, very key character. So the Harpers are just this sort of organization dedicated to defending the innocent and maintaining the balance between civilization and the natural world. And in this assault, they were completely successful, wiping out the cultists and rescuing all the Bhaal babies. Now I gotta give one last warning for massive Baldur's Gate 1 spoilers. Okay, you still there? Okay, here we go. So amongst those Bhaalspawn rescued was not only this Sarevok guy, but you, player character of BG1. Oh shit! And well, Gorion and his boys didn't want to just stop the ritual, they wanted to make an attempt at giving these children a fair shake at life, their evil blood be damned. It also was for sure in the best interest of the realm to protect these children, because each one's death brought Bhaal that much closer to returning. So you are personally adopted by Gorion, and then the other Bhaalspawn are kind of shuffled about and found homes as well, all but one. In the confusion of this assault, a single child was left behind, Sarevok. And this specific Bhaalspawn being forgotten is something that would come back to haunt Gorion and the realm at large in a big, big way. So the details from here are rather cloudy. As a baby, we can assume someone found him and cared for him in a basic fashion, but as he grew into a young boy, Sarevok was a street urchin, homeless, with no family or community or identity whatsoever, neglected and passed over by the world, simply trying to survive day to day. Now I think it is very safe to assume that this sort of childhood jaded Sarevok greatly, and planted in him a seed of anger and hatred that was only nurtured by his true nature and parentage. But that chapter of his life would soon come to a close, as he was found on the streets by a particularly powerful and very cunning man, a man named Rylter Anchev. So, Anchev was a human that had cut out an extremely influential and even more shady career as part of the entity known as the Iron Throne. Rylter was rich, he was powerful, and he wasn't necessarily Mother Teresa, let's just say. But the Iron Throne is a very important thing to cover here. So it was basically an arms dealer, a mercantile organization that sought influence and control over Faerûn by creating little monopolies in the weapons business. And listen, they had no problem using thuggery or murder to snuff out the competition. Their goal was to control contracts, resources, and supply chains all across the world in an effort to assert themselves as a power far greater than they ever appeared to be from the outside. So Sarevok was then adopted by this man. And honestly, I don't know at all if he was aware of the Baal spawn aspect of this kid, because remember, at this point the god Baal is dead and been dead. I mean, I really wonder how much Rylter knew, if anything. Maybe he legitimately just wanted a son, a protege, an extra set of hands around the house. No idea. And so, he was taken in, raised by this rather scummy criminal kingpin who was tasked at the time with establishing the influence of the Iron Throne more firmly in Baldur's Gate and the surrounding area. Now sadly, very little is known about our villain's actual childhood here with Rylter, aside from two very important things. So the first is that Sarevok experienced, just like the player character and every other Baal spawn, vivid and constant dreams about destruction, violence, and mayhem. Some of them with apparent personal messages from Baal. And my god, that's gotta have a negative impact on a kid. When I was younger, I used to have nightmares about that episode of Goosebumps with the evil mask that gets stuck on the girl's face, and that wrecked me emotionally. But the second thing is maybe even more traumatic. So Rylter at some point caught Sarevok's foster mother being unfaithful and strangled her to death right in front of Sarevok. I mean, damn. Being Baal spawn's probably gonna give the guy a tough enough internal battle, but being around that level of violence and anger absolutely disturbed our villain to his core. But slowly, over the years, Sarevok grew from that boy into a young man. A broad, massive young man at that, of impressive strength and intelligence. It seems his close proximity to the Iron Throne and his father's massive network gave him ample resources to constantly train his body and mind alike. But as he matured, the nightmares increased, and the nature of his true father ran hotter and hotter in his veins by the year. Sarevok carried a certain bloodthirst always, a constant feeling of anger and an edge, a readiness for violence and domination. Well, at some point, those dreams grew so troublesome, Sarevok sought out a Baalist cult priest to ask him for further information about this dead god and try to figure out why he was coming to him in his dreams. But when the priest was kinda no help, Sarevok snapped and killed him on the spot. This possibly being the first of many deaths that he would eventually hand out. So even though he was struggling at this time in his life, Sarevok had totally come into his own as a young adult, acting as the right-hand man to his father Rylter. And the Iron Throne was still in that process of establishing more influence around the Sword Coast. And so business was taking the two all over the region, to Baldur's Gate even, and it was during these trips that Sarevok took every opportunity to research his troubling dreams and read everything he could get his hands on about Baal. And it was then that Sarevok came across an extremely interesting text, the Baal Spawn prophecy I mentioned earlier, written by Alondo. And upon reading it himself, Sarevok was blown away, all but convinced that he was one of these spawn. But a particular line of that prophecy really stood out, and it read, "Deaths they bring shall awaken the Father, and through them he will rise." Now, Sarevok's somewhat incorrect interpretation of this line was that if he, as a Baal spawn, were able to incite mass-scale death and destruction, he personally would then be able to ascend to godhood and take the vacancy Baal left, becoming the new Lord of Murder. This revelation is the biggest turn in Sarevok's villainy, and he began studying immediately with a man named Winsky Perore, who acted as a dark mentor, further ushering Anchev toward the teachings and ways of Baal. And side note here, while traveling with his father and reading about this prophecy, the two actually visited Candlekeep, the famous library fortress where your player character was currently growing up. And dude, Sarevok encountered you there as well as your guardian Gorion before any of the events we see in-game. So the player character was of course unaware of the whole Baal spawn thing at the time, but Sarevok instantly recognized you as one of his brothers and knew also that you were powerful as well as a potential threat to his fresh dreams of godhood. So he made a little mental note to return to Candlekeep in the future and deal with you personally.
Foreshadowing.
So Sarevok was as a man quite obviously disturbed, but also extremely ambitious and very informed. I mean, he continued to study all of these ancient texts regarding Baal, while also having a very good handle on the current political climate of the region thanks to his connection to the Iron Throne. Throw in some vigorous physical and martial training and the simple fact that this homie stood between 6'7" and 7 feet tall? Whew! Sarevok was destined to be a serious problem here on the Sword Coast, and soon. He just needed a plan. But really quick, can I tell you my plan? My plan this upcoming weekend is to stay in, get a mountain of snacks, boot up my PC, and play some good old War Thunder with the boys. And you know what? War Thunder was kind enough to sponsor today's video. So if you don't already know, War Thunder is a free-to-play vehicle combat game on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. It sports well over 2,000 different tanks, planes, choppers, and ships that span over 100 years of real-world history, as you throw yourself into the thick of epic-scale PvP battles. But every single one of those vehicles is expertly crafted down to the individual components and details. It's very impressive stuff. Throw in a great player-friendly, in-depth customization system, and man, you got yourself a real rompin' good time. But I think the thing I like most about the game is probably just the sheer scale of the gameplay. It feels fast-paced with tons of stakes in the moment-to-moment experience. So, my friends, I ask you to join me in the sky, land, and sea. Click that pinned comment down below right after this video, and if you're a new player, you're going to enjoy yourself a massive pack of goodies. Thank you so much again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and now we return to our feature presentation. Alright, well first off, I gotta say how much I enjoy the backstory of Sarevok. Traditional game settings like this often have pretty bland or predictable bad guys, let's be honest. But this one's setup to villainy is a really nice narrative balance. The events that led little kid Sarevok to being forgotten, then homeless, then adopted by a kinda asshole dude are not his fault at all. And across the story of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, we see plenty of other Bhaalspawn characters that, growing up in more stable circumstances, turned out alright, all things considered. So his early path toward evil was a combo pack of nurture and of course nature. Well, there are very few methods of mass-scale manipulation and murder more effective than good old-fashioned politics. And conveniently, in the background of Sarevok's self-realization, his father was devising a brand new, massive, sinister scheme to bring untold wealth and influence to the Iron Throne. So this plot revolved around intentionally hindering the iron trade all over the Sword Coast, creating a massive shortage and then selling the highest quality iron at a premium that the Iron Throne had stockpiled. And this plan right here is a very important part of Sarevok's villainy, so please listen close, my friends. Step 1 of Rylter's plan: sabotage and spoil the iron being mined in the town of Nashkel to the south. This is not only a key iron mine as far as quantity produced and traded, but also technically just lies inside the southern kingdom of Amn, making it look like they are producing bad stuff. Step 2, hire bandits and ruffians to raid iron shipments all along the Coastway Road, the trade route heading from Amn right to Baldur's Gate, furthering fear and tensions between the two while also legitimately bleeding the north of iron over time. And step 3, hire doppelgangers, crazy magical creatures, to assume identities of powerful individuals within the other guilds and associations around Baldur's Gate. The Seven Sons Trading Coster, the Merchants League, and even your home of Candlekeep. This way, the Iron Throne can keep their finger on the pulse of what is happening within the walls of all of their competitors and monitor this iron crisis from every angle as the region begins to squirm. So with this iron shortage plan, it's important to remember that we're in like a classic Middle Ages fantasy world. Iron is everything. Weaponry, horseshoes, door hinges, medical equipment, building materials, the list goes on and on. So having a shortage of this stuff could legitimately cripple a city like Baldur's Gate or an entire kingdom or continent that has come to rely on the resource so heavily. So the goal with this manufactured crisis was to have Baldur's Gate naturally start pointing the finger southward, while the Iron Throne's agents would spread rumors about Amn preparing for a large-scale war. Then just as tensions reached a boiling point, the Iron Throne would come forward with clean good iron for everyone that they were secretly mining in the Cloak Wood and play savior, supplying both sides with plenty of resources at a very high price, and then de-escalating political tensions between the two, cashing in big time with gold and diplomatic favor. And holy smokes, do I love the plan here. It's almost Palpatine-esque, puppet master type stuff, baby, top shelf. Creating this big conflict and then solving it as the peacemaker? Very, very evil, very corrupt, simply wonderful. But right there is where Rylter wanted everything to end, because of course his interest is in the power of the Iron Throne and the riches he could take home himself. But Sarevok played an integral role in the hatching of this initial plan. And he secretly never saw things concluding with the Iron Throne saving the day, because as the scheme took shape, Sarevok saw an incredible opportunity for himself. And he created a subplot here to push the conflict over that boiling point when the time came, intentionally beginning a long, massive, gruesome war with years of carnage and death. The teachings of Winsky, the Baal cult, and his obsession with the prophecy led him to believe this would perhaps be enough blood spilled to allow Sarevok to then ascend and sit on the bloody throne of Baal himself. That is certainly what our spiky-clad homie was banking on. So eventually, all the necessary preparations were made. Sarevok probably laughed evilly to himself as Rylter and his goons got to work. The Iron Crisis was officially underway. But a little side note, man. I think an undervalued and extremely important trait Sarevok possesses as a villain is his charisma. Now, you may look at, well, this and think, dude, there's no way he can talk to someone without making that person pee-pee their pants. But by all accounts in the lore of the Forgotten Realms, when he wanted to be, Sarevok could put that aside and was extremely charming, regularly getting politicians, mercenaries, and other really influential people easily in his corner. But I gotta remind you again that all throughout his adult life, the Iron Crisis beginning and his big master plan unfurling, nobody publicly knew that he was trying to do any of this. To most, he was simply Mr. Anchev, the adopted son of Rylter and a member of the Iron Throne. So then damn, you got this big, charming, genius-killing machine playing the long game and building an inner circle of extremely powerful people. How on earth can a villain like this be stopped? Well, that is of course where we come in and where Baldur's Gate 1 begins. Now, I cannot stress enough that if you are watching this video right now and you've been enjoying Baldur's Gate 3 but haven't played through these original games, do it, man. I know they look a little busted by comparison, but I promise you, the narrative and the world will absolutely suck you in if you give it a good honest try. And I will never shut up about preserving these experiences from the classic era. Dude, the 2012 enhanced editions make it so easy to just sit down and go. Modern Resolution, it's on Switch. Okay, enough preaching, I'm sorry. Well, one of the especially fun aspects of Baldur's Gate 1 to me is how quickly things get underway. In the opening cinematic, we are somewhat mysteriously introduced to our villain as he finds a fellow Bhaalspawn and kills the hell out of him. Now this is something that Sarevok is likely doing because every Bhaalspawn that isn't himself poses a threat to his aspirations of godhood. But just from this iconic scene, his menacing presence and sinister voice mark him as the obvious big bad. Now there is a difference here between the original cutscenes in funky-ass 3D and then the enhanced editions, and I gotta say, I like both. I know that's a hot take, fight me. And I think regardless, it's nice to see this terrifying guy, voiced by the legendary Kevin Michael Richardson, establish himself early on. And I mean, when it comes to voice acting royalty, Mr. Richardson is absolutely elite. He's in Fallout 2, tons of Star Wars games, Kingdom Hearts, Soul Calibur, Halo 2, dozens of movies and TV shows, the list goes on. You know his voice from something, I guarantee it. He's Captain Gantu from Lilo and Stitch, man.
There you go, all buckled up for the trip.
But the moment you hit new game, that quick start only continues. Once you make your character, the first loading screen tells you some very interesting information about your foster father, rushing you to depart Candlekeep now.
Orion, acting as your father, he has raised you on 1,000 tales of heroes and monsters, lovers and infidels, battles and tragedies. However, one story was always left untold, that of your true heritage. Imparting hurried instructions for you to equip yourself for travel, he has handed you what gold he can spare, but given no clue as to why. Nevertheless, you now stand before the Candlekeep Inn, ready to purchase what you need for an unplanned and unexpected journey.
Well, damn, okay. And so your journey begins. And although you don't know it yet, you are Bhaalspawn, just like Sarevok. He is your half-brother, and in this quest to become the sole heir to Bhaal's throne, he intends to kill you as soon as possible. Well, buddy, that reality is rapidly approaching, because after wrapping up the intro area within Candlekeep, fighting off a few of Sarevok's assassins, you and your foster father Gorion feverishly make an exit.
Listen carefully. If we ever become separated, it is imperative that you make your way to the Friendly Arm Inn. There you will meet Khalid and Jaheira. They have long been my friends, and you can trust them.
Only to be confronted just outside the gates of the Great Library Fortress.
Must find shelter soon. Don't worry. I'll explain everything as soon as there is time. Wait, there is something wrong. We are in an ambush. Prepare yourself.
You're perceptive for an old man. You know why I'm here. Hand over your ward and no one will be hurt. If you resist, it shall be a waste of your life.
You're a fool if you believe I would trust your benevolence. Step aside and you and your lackeys will be unhurt.
I'm sorry that you feel that way, old man.
Holy smokes. I mean, welcome to Faerun, you little sniveling baby. Sarevok murders Gorion in front of your eyes and you escape, fleeing into the woods to hide and fight another day. But remember also that if you're playing blind, you know nothing about Sarevok at this point. He is simply the armored figure, a mystery man, and his grand scheme with the Iron Crisis is already well underway. But I think seeing what the main bad guy can do so early on is magnificent. Too many modern games take so long in general, but especially when it comes to revealing your opposition. And I love that within the first 15 minutes of opening Baldur's Gate 1, you've seen more than enough reason to want to get after it and kick this dude's ass. And let's be honest, this is an older game where there's a lot of walls of text between gameplay sections, so having a clear goal from the beginning and a face to that evil is really helpful fuel, you know what I mean? So I guess the good news is that Sarevok failed in killing you, and after Gorion's sacrifice was forced to retreat and circle back to you at a later date. But now you are set loose on the Sword Coast. Your close friend who also grew up in Candlekeep, Imoen, joins your company, and your adventure begins to take shape. I think another wonderful aspect of this villain is how the path to stopping him is anything but a straight line. Because as we mentioned, Sarevok has been playing the Game of Thrones for some time before the game even starts, so dismantling his scheme sort of has to be a process. So step 1 is to head to the inn Gorion mentioned to meet the legendary characters Jaheira and Khalid. And from here, with your party, you can't return to Candlekeep nor enter Baldur's Gate thanks to the tensions around the region. So what else to do but look into this iron shortage that literally every character mentions in some way, shape, or form. Hell, maybe it will lead to some answers for your player character about Gorion's death and his reason for rushing you out of your home in the middle of the night. Now, of course, this is a massive RPG with tons of side missions, world building, atmospheric storytelling, and all that jazz, but if you're sticking to the main quest and just following the rumors about the shortages, you will inevitably end up heading south to the Nashkel Mines. And this, boy, is where you start to pick up the breadcrumbs of villainy. When you get there, there's absolutely some funny monkey business going on. The ore here is without a doubt being tainted, and after a good few tussles and some spelunking, it's Scooby-Doo levels of clue hunting time. You travel all over the Sword Coast, learning about the bandit attacks and the complex layers of leadership and schemes that have the region in a vice grip. But while you are doing that, Rylter and another one of his close Iron Throne buddies named Brunos come to a horrifying realization that his adopted son Sarevok has a much bloodier outcome in mind for their scheme. So the two scramble a bit and then head to Candlekeep to meet with the Knights of the Shield. Now this is just another kind of shady organization that meddles in political matters. And the goal of this meeting was really simple. Bring all these bright minds together and find a quick path to peace. Okay, Iron Crisis was fun while it lasted, great idea, but they can't let an actual war start because these fellas, as scummy as they are, were simply trying to run a business, and in this instance, war is bad business. So damn, Sarevok kinda got found out, but as he always seems to be, was already several steps ahead of this issue, and let's just say, he planned on attending this meeting with his daddy, one way or another. So while this is all happening, you and your party continue to uncover the full truth of the Iron Crisis, discovering the mine and the Cloakwood, and finally traveling to Baldur's Gate, showing your proof of this grand conspiracy to one of the dukes of the city. And this is where you, the player, catch wind of this meeting Rylter and his boys are going to have in Candlekeep. So you plan to head there yourself and spy on said meeting to gain more information, putting you on a collision course with Sarevok. Now this is actually the first time you have been able to return home to Candlekeep since the very beginning of the game, and it is here that you discover the very same prophecy Sarevok did, alongside a letter personally from Gorion revealing that you are among the Bhaalspawn. Oh shit, it's certainly a big reveal. But remember that still, to this point, you do not know the name Sarevok. Well, on the second floor of the keep during the meeting section, you meet a humble man named Kovaras, and well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that this name is simply Sarevok spelled backwards. He comes right up to you and in the seemingly benign encounter claims that he used to be a friend of Gorion and even worked for him. Matter of fact, he happens to have a magical ring that Gorion gave him meant to be passed to you in the event of his death. Well, thank you, kind stranger. Kovaras then tips you off to the fact that the Iron Throne members are in the building, suggesting that if we were gonna kill him, now would be a great time. Then he walks off, but oh baby, this is just the genius of Sarevok at work. So, if you want to, you can confront Rylter and the others and murder them, as suggested. But if you don't do it, Sarevok will, and then have you and your party framed for the crime, landing you all in jail, regardless of what you decided to do. But Sarevok is ensuring that the man who raised him, saved him from the streets, meets his doom here and now because he was deemed no longer useful. That is about as cold-blooded and wicked as it gets. I love it. But as a beautiful little sinister detail, that ring he gifts you is actually a Shadow Thief assassin ring, making it all too easy for him to point the finger your way as the obvious guilty party. So just like that, in one fell swoop in the same building, Sarevok eliminated the Iron Throne resistance to his war, assumed massive control over their entire organization, as well as imprisoned you, his half-brother who posed a threat to his position. And from here, he sprints over to Baldur's Gate to make his biggest political move yet. But what the hell are you gonna do about it? You're in jail. Well, thankfully the player character still has some friends within Candlekeep, and Tetheril, one of the keepers, comes to you. He believes in your innocence and also brings information. He tells you all about Sarevok, the real identity of Kovaras, and that he was the one who killed Gorion and he wishes to kill you next. But even better, Tetheril teleports you and the homies out of the jail cell where you can make your escape. So as you fight through the caves trying to make it to Baldur's Gate, Sarevok is up to some real doo-doo, assassinating one of the 4 Grand Dukes of the city, poisoning Duke Eltan who helped you earlier, and putting himself in position to be coronated as the replacement Grand Duke immediately. He weaponizes the fear in the city surrounding an impending war with Amn and promises he is the only one to lead the armies and make the region safe yet again. And this is where all those connections and charisma are flexed as a villain. Well, as the game is coming to a climactic close, this is really where you get filled in. The scale of the Iron Crisis, the ways in which Sarevok saw himself as this bloody chosen one, the war he was attempting to start, and all the moving parts of a brilliantly evil plan. You get to speak with characters like Winsky and other Sarevok minions and really get the meat of it, baby. And this section is the greatest joy of Baldur's Gate 1 to me to this day. Sarevok is so smoothly built up from a malicious question mark to one of the finest crafted epic fantasy bad guys of all time, in my opinion. A true mastermind and a selfish son of a bitch. And once you have compiled all of this information, there's nothing else to do but crash his party right as he has his goal in sight. The night of his appointment as Grand Duke, you and your party storm in and present all those in attendance with irrefutable evidence of every single piece of evil done by your brother. Documents incriminating him, as well as his personal journal containing his thoughts and musings. Instantly, chaos ensues and Sarevok escapes out of the palace into an underground temple of Bhaal beneath the city. You of course chase after him, and after a bit of a dungeon crawl, it's time for the final showdown.
You are indeed family. No other could have lived to oppose me in person. Of course, it will not matter in the end. Ultimately, I will prevail, and a new era will be born unto the realms. Your death is inevitable. The streets will run red with blood when my work is finished. Killing is our father's work. Embrace it as I have.
And boy, oh boy, if you don't know what you're doing with building your character, I gotta be honest, you're in for a tough fight. He's level 15 with 18 strength and 17 constitution, over 130 HP, not to mention he's a grandmaster with large swords. Add on a bunch of magical resistances and the fact that he calls on some of his goons to help you out, it can be a pretty stressful encounter, as it should be. But if you're playing the Enhanced Edition, you have a much more manageable fight on your hands, because in the original game, Sarevok had a whopping 3.5 attacks per round, a 100% immunity to magical damage, and immunity to traps. I mean, dude was an absolute unit. But no matter what version of the game you are playing, I love how Sarevok feels like your equal on a well-built character. He's tough, but hey, he's still human, just like you. And after executing a strategy that works for your party, maybe save scumming a few times and getting good RNG on your hits and misses, the Deathbringer finally falls. Sarevok's role as a villain is nothing less than spectacular, in my opinion. There is the perfect balance of kind of fun, mustache-twirling evil and then legitimate malice and tactics. But hey, more of my thoughts in a minute, because believe it or not, this is not the end. So Baldur's Gate 2 picks up immediately after the first game with a whole new villain and epic adventure awaiting the player. Irenicus plays bad guy here, and honestly, he's even better than Sarevok, but that's a story for another time. But near the end of this sequel, you travel to the Abyss, aka the chaotic evil universe of darkness and demons, and at the risk of this video becoming way too long, let's just say you got some business to handle down there. You're gathering up the Tears of Baal to open an ancient door that leads to the final battle, and one of the trials you must overcome is called the Test of Wrath, where you are confronted by an illusion of Sarevok's spirit. That spirit goads you into accepting the powers of your shared father and turning into a monster. You can either give in or fight off the urge and defeat that illusion, but it's a pretty cool little fight. However, the real meat of the Sarevok continued experience comes later in the Throne of Baal expansion pack. So this is the final act in the Bhaalspawn story, and at this point, let's just say there's tons of Bhaalspawn at war, going crazy, and each trying to become the new Lord of Murder. It's a wild time. But as it relates to Sarevok, he has obviously been dead for a while. However, in his stubbornness and sheer determination, has refused to pass on to whatever afterlife awaited him. And during Throne of Baal, the player character finds himself in a place called the Pocket Plane. It's basically an interdimensional Baal-themed home base of sorts, you know, one of the perks of being a total pimp. Well, the spirit of Sarevok takes note of this pocket plane in the space-time continuum and heads there himself as a disembodied molten spirit thing.
So, you have finally arrived. I have been waiting for you.
And here he communicates with you, brokering a deal. If you give up a shard of your divine soul to bring him back to life, he will assist you in your quest to end that current crisis. He claims he has information that can help you understand and fulfill your destiny. And while he still seems pretty damn evil, there is a sort of sadness about this encounter as well. He interestingly says he doesn't know what he's going to do with the second chance at life, but he wants to live and try to figure it out. Now, is this blackmail? Yeah, a little bit, but no one said your brother was a good guy, right? So if you grant Sarevok his wish, he will indeed be reborn right before your eyes. But instead of an adversary, he joins your cause as a party member. You can force him to swear an oath of servitude if you want to, but since he was killed in his original form, he is actually no longer Bhaalspawn at all. That essence of the dead god was already released, and he now can simply live as a man attempting to find his place in everything. Now, over time, if you travel with Sarevok, it seems to me he wanted a second chance because he wished to travel with you and see the prophecy through to the end, even if he was not going to be a part of it. Because hey, at the end of the day, I think this is a character that admires strength and power, so fighting at his brother's side for him in some way is an honor. And I love having Sarevok in this form in my party. It's so damn cool. I mean, he's very strong, of course, now just a fighter at 17th level with like massive damage output, but also hearing his banter with the other characters in your party and seeing him interact with the world as an ally is just, chef's kiss, man.
I have had enough of your constant flinching, Druid. Do you have something to say to me or not?
I apologize, Sarevok. I know that there are reasons for your presence amongst us, but you seem so unnatural to me that I cannot help but be repelled.
I've been thinking, Gnome, about a certain trading deal my stepfather made several years ago.
Your stepfather, eh? Was he a megalomaniac as well? Must have been quite a merchant.
What is that I smell? A burning rage? Hatred barely controlled? Jaheira, your eyes threaten to cut out my heart as I stand.
Walk where you will. My fight with you is over.
In my playthrough I did for this video, I started to really care for him. I mean, that's my brother after all. Rascally bastard had to be killed to be put in his place, but shit. You gotta love him in some way. You can have really deep talks with him about your connection, the parentage, the things that happened in the first game, and so on. And if you're playing as a good character, dude, you can slowly see him changing his perspective on the world, going from a chaotic evil alignment to chaotic good over the course of 3 incredible conversations. It's just, I think, an amazing implementation of the narrative tool of a second chance. If you're evil or you're good, it just works flawlessly. And Sarevok, he's an absolute gangster in Baldur's Gate 2, man. I love it. So then you go forth, you finish off the game, defeat this lady Amalyssin, who's another Bhaalspawn up to no good, again a story for another time, and after you complete the task, your party goes their separate ways. But what happens to Sarevok after Baldur's Gate 2 and how he walks the world now as an untainted but still somewhat black-hearted and ruthless guy is honestly pretty tragic. The Forgotten Realms canon says that he then traveled far and wide, all over the world, and had various insane adventures solo. He defeated an entire orc army alone, became a conqueror, and marched on the massive city of Westgate for no reason, buried the love of his life Tomoko in Karatur. But no matter where his travels took him, Sarevok remained confused and angry. And yes, his divine heritage granted him extremely long life, but he always struggled to find a meaning to it after a time. And so for the most part, he wandered from the highest peaks to the darkest depths of the abyss, in the deepest parts of himself, lost. And that is originally where Sarevok's story ended. But recently, as we stated at the top of the video, Baldur's Gate 3 released, and to complete the hat trick, Sarevok has returned yet again. But before I cover anything about this appearance, I'm gonna be really honest with you, I don't like it.
This is the court.
of the Dread Lord's Tribunal. I am its custodian. Here come those who seek to transcend, aspirants of his most profane order, the would-be unholy assassins of Baal.
Why are you talking like that?
Because as excellent as Baldur's Gate 3 is, Larian seemed to squeeze as many fan-favorite or already known characters in there as humanly possible, which feels like a bit too much fan service sometimes, especially when it comes to Sarevok. So in Act 3 of the game, you finally head to Baldur's Gate and explore the city. Well, at a certain point, you meet a lovely young woman named Orin the Red, a shape-shifting, murdering master of violence who happens to be the incestuous granddaughter of Mr. Anchev. And through her storyline, you go to investigate some murders, and it eventually leads you to the lower city. Then underneath Candle Hollow's tombstones, you uncover something shocking. The Murder Tribunal, a sinister little pocket of Baal cult activities headlined by the tribunal's judge, Sarevok Anchev. Now, I don't need to give the full context of his appearance, because Orin is this big character all to herself tied up with the Absolute Crisis, and again, I'm avoiding all major spoilers for the plot of that game. But when I personally came across Sarevok and saw that he had kind of returned to his Baldur's Gate 1 energy with the spiky Baal armor and overtly evil demeanor, I was pretty disappointed. He is here, working hard, deciding who is worthy to serve the god of murder as a future unholy assassin. Oh right, key thing here by the way, Baal at some point between the games was finally resurrected. Good for him. Well, kind of resurrected. Again, another story for another time. This shit is way too layered. But coming here and learning that he filled that sense of uncertainty about his life with just becoming a Baal cultist and running the whole thing back, it honestly doesn't make any sense to me. Because even in his initial streak of evil in the first game, he was never at any point devoutly following his dead father, Baal. Honestly, kind of the opposite. He was using the power given to him by the god for very selfish reasons. He just wanted to become divine himself and rule eternally. He was not enchanted by the teachings of the cult or anything even close to it. It was always just a means to an end. So seeing him now, kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and deciding who's worthy to serve his father, it just really doesn't click for me, dude. I mean, I would have loved if his fate was left completely uncertain, but in Baldur's Gate 3 you hear whispers about a legendary and terrifying thing Sarevok did, or something like that. But actually putting him back in the role of minor villain with this look, it just felt cheap and kind of misplaced, while also making the events of his rebirth in the second game feel pointless. However, I gotta give them their props. If you bring some of the returning party members from the classic games, there is some very cool interactions that are very fun to watch. And additionally, you can play the game as a Baal spawn called the Dark Urge, and that gives a whole other host of interesting options here. So there is some care put into his implementation for sure. And hey, if during your playthrough push comes to shove and you need to fight Mr. Anchev here, you are in for a very fun, brutal, and rather difficult fight. Maybe this is the last time he falls, but something tells me Sarevok will always return in some way. But I do want to hear your thoughts and opinions on this appearance. Please let me know down below in the comments. Sarevok Anchev has an undeniably titanic legacy when it comes to video game villains. The fantastic lore of the Forgotten Realms D&D setting came to life in a huge way with the release of Baldur's Gate 1 way back in 1998, and the iconic brand of storytelling and world building was carried so heavily by the main villain. But what I really love about Sarevok can be broken into two main ingredients. Number one, the incredible and tragic backstory, almost being sacrificed as a baby, being left behind and forgotten, growing up homeless and then probably abused. I mean, no character, fictional or otherwise, should go through that, dude, not even the son of the god of murder. But then number two is how that boy grows into this twisted man, learning about the prophecy, feeling this hunger for that level of divine power. The way he concocts this masterful plot on the back of his dad's scheme, this large-scale thing involving all these moving pieces. Yes, he may have misread Alondo's writings and thought he was some sort of chosen one, but his level of tactical genius, physical power, and charisma puts him in an absolutely elite class when it comes to my personal favorite bad guys. And the way that everything almost works out perfectly is beautiful to behold. So then we have to ponder the question we always ask in these videos: why did this specific villain fail? And to me, the answer is very simple. one loose end left untied. When he comes to assassinate you and Gorion at the very beginning of the game, it was in an effort to kill yet another ball spawn with the potential to take what Sarevok wanted, but also to take out Gorion, who held a lot of valuable knowledge that Sarevok wanted to kind of snuff out. But bruh, that one ball spawn he fumbled that fateful night ended up being the one with all of the right resources set up by Gorion to slowly but surely unravel the tapestry of evil that Sarevok had woven over years. His confidence that he could simply deal with you later ended up being his greatest downfall. If he had seen you, his brother, as a true equal, he would have been much more proactive about handling you himself. Simply put, he underestimated you, grew too bloodthirsty, eventually being confronted right at the finish line and losing it all. But I think even the idea of his failure is beautifully addressed and handled in his rebirth in the sequel, because once he's back, he openly sees himself as inferior to you and understands his mistake in thinking that he could outwit or outmuscle you in the past. This character is then given a chance to grow, to feel, to connect with his brother after living a full life and death of violence and single-mindedness. It is just a very cool thing to experience as a player, which is also kind of why this basic appearance in BG3 annoyed me so much, but whatever, I gotta get over it. At least now a lot of younger gamers and people playing only Baldur's Gate 3 will know who he is at all, which I see as a net positive. But I saved the best for last, because the coolest thing about Sarevok is the origin of his name and design. So years before the development of Baldur's Gate 1 in the early 1990s, lead game designer James Olin ran a classic D&D campaign with some of his close buddies. Well, one of those guys was named Jeff Weitenheimer, and he played a character that quickly became a group favorite. A massive, evil human gladiator who wielded a powerful Githyanki silver sword, overpowering opponents with superior strength and a ruthless enjoyment for bloodshed. And that character's name was Sarevok. Now, the details of their campaign and the original version of the characters are completely unknown to me, but dude, if you've played D&D before, you just know some of the crazy things that happened in James Olin's garage some Saturday night 35 years ago definitely made it into the characterization of the Sarevok we all know today, which I just think is so damn cool I could pee my pants. I mean, I'm imagining one of my favorite characters I have ever made and played, Brick 9, a socially challenged, violent, and oftentimes naked deep gnome, becoming a beloved villain by millions of people around the world. That is just so cool, dude. Also, look at the magic cards that Sarevok has been featured in. I just love this. From the very beginning, with Bhaal's mortal quest for divinity, to the time of troubles as the god of murder attempted to avoid his own doom, Sarevok was born into the world of Faerûn for a reason. He believed he had found that reason, to assume the mantle of a dead god, but he was wrong. Sarevok was part of a plot much bigger than himself, a plot where he was just a tiny piece of a puzzle. But your player character is no different. Sarevok's circumstances and surroundings led him down a dark path of corruption and evil, but your humble upbringing under Gorion's wing is proof that free will and individuality can overcome a dark destiny. Both of these characters kind of mirroring each other, showing us that the power is never in the hand we are dealt, but how we decide to play with the cards we are given. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the end. It means the world, as always. What a great character, man. An all-time classic. For those curious, I think if I was putting him in the Season 1 tier list, he would easily make A, possibly even the lower rankings of S. I want to thank War Thunder again for sponsoring this rather chunky video. Remember to check out that link down below and support the channel. So, my friends, what villain should come next? Let me know all of your thoughts, opinions, and random ideas down below, and I will see you all very soon. Until next time, peace.